Hi, everyone. This is your host, Natalie, and welcome to Sorted Out Podcast. I am so thrilled to have each and every one of you joining me on this journey. It's been super nerve-wracking because this is so out of my comfort zone. I'm a really private person, but I really wanted to make one of my 2025 resolutions to really start being more intentional and like doing more things that I feel are more aligned with who I am. And I want to stop letting fear be one of the reasons why I stopped living that way. And in case you guys didn't get a chance to see why I started out, sorted out, I really wanted to build a community based off, bringing a lot of controversial, authentic things that we all kind of deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I feel that just are not being talked about, especially because I think Gen Z and millennials, we all view and navigate life so differently than previous generations. And so I really feel like nowadays podcasts or books, I just feel like it gets a little bit cliche and redundant. But at this point, I just really wanted to bring a lot more of a practical way on how to approach and do life a little bit better. So without further ado, I really want to introduce one of my best friends. She is a phenomenal person. She really is such one of my healthiest relationships in my life. I love her so much. So I'm going to give it to Kylie.
Hello, everybody. Happy 2025. I'm Kylie, and I'm honestly so honored and flattered that when Natalie came to me and asked to be a guest on her podcast, we have so many deep conversations together, and I feel like every time we're girl chit-chatting, it's just it's also...
The chicken's clucking.
Yeah, the chickens are clucking, but it also just duels as a therapy session. So it's the best kind of friendship. I feel every time we meet, it's invigorating and we're bringing energy to one another and inspiring each other. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm also glad that I made it because I just spent the last week in Tulum in the jungle. So
y'all should have seen her stories. That stuff is wild. She really does live a double life.
Balance. It's all about
balance. It is about
balance. It was fun.
My little Hannah Montana.
I'm
double life.
Back to the concrete jungle of Dallas. So here I am, but it was a nice change of pace being around, just immersed in nature for a bit.
I want to ask you, what are your 2025 resolutions before we dive deep into what are the main topic?
There's so many, but piggybacking off of what you said earlier, being more intentional, I would say that just refining boundaries. So just making my circle even tighter and just really stopping to pause and be intentional before I say yes to things. I think that over the last year, I said yes to a lot, and I found myself overwhelmed in certain seasons. So just pausing and asking myself, do I want to do this or do I not? Mm-hmm. And really just choosing to only do the things that I want to do. So it sounds simple, but I think that a lot of us take that for granted, and that just pausing, and sometimes we can just impulsively say yes. And so just protecting my peace with tighter boundaries.
That's good. Those are good intentions for 2025. I think you and I like to stay busy. We like to be productive.
Booked and busy, like you say.
I tell her all the time, I'm like, you literally are always booked and busy, and I love that. I just feel like it feels good to feel productive, and I don't know about you, but I've definitely have learned in 2024 to be more okay with resting and finding a balance, because I think a lot of times when I rest I feel so guilty and lazy, but it's okay to rest, and recharge,
just to give yourself that space
and that grace. Yeah,
sometimes you have to schedule rest.
Yeah, no, literally.
Put it on the calendar.
I could see you doing that. For me, I'm I'll just take one day to myself, but I'm so big on self-care. With that being said, I really wanted to dive deep in this episode's topic, in which is redefining negative experiences. And this topic is really important to me because Kylie knows this, obviously being one of my best friends. The past 2 years have been extremely difficult for me. And I think there's a lot that has happened in my childhood and in my life. And I feel if you know me really well, you kind of know what I'm referring to. And I think you guys will slowly get to know me a little bit better as you guys listen to this podcast on things that I've definitely have gone through. I think a lot of times there's this misconception that because I come from a certain background and my parents do well for themselves, that I have it all together, everything's okay. But I've actually gone through a lot of traumatic things, a lot of loss. And so, I've spent a lot of the last, 5 years probably building my career and you know, being at the point that I wanted to be at, where I felt content with myself. And over the last 2 years, I basically like lost everything, really, truthfully, in my career and like my finances and like friends and just so many things. And obviously moving to a new city is like super scary, but I'm also like so glad, because I feel like now I have really been able to like restructure my life to a point where I went back home for a little bit when I lost everything for a few months. And then I came back to Dallas recently, and I'm so pleased and happy with like how I feel like I got like a second chance to like rebuild my life here. And now I feel like I've aligned myself with like better friends, more supportive friendships. And like Kylie and I have like also reconnected on a far deeper level as well. And I just feel like I was able to step back and like come back and do it again in a lot better way. But I definitely will say I've been able to really shift my mindset in a way that you can see positivity and the negative. And I think that in itself is such a positive thing. And I always tell all my friends, I'm like, you know, there's always a lesson to be learned in everything. And I feel like if you're not seeing that, then you need to reflect a little bit more. And with that being said, I wanted Kylie to really kind of share an experience that she's had and how she's shifted her mindset from going through like negative experiences, or a really big one that she wants to share, and how she changed it into a positive one. So if you want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, when you asked me, okay, redefining negative experiences, the first thing that came to mind that was just life-altering experience that ended up coming out on top of was I think of my marriage. That's what comes to mind. So I've been divorced now for 4 years, and I was married to the father of my 2 sons for 5. And so we were together for 9, like on and off, married for 5, just to give you some background. And we have 2 sons. They're 9 and 5 years old. And
they're like the cutest. Like
they're so much
beautiful.
fun. I love being a boy mom. It's always, it's a good time. But so I would say that, you know, just being married to someone who struggles with alcohol abuse and addiction was definitely a challenging season of my life. Just multiple years just dealing with that, trying to, you know, keep my family together and just be the glue that tries to hold us together. But ultimately I ended up realizing that you can't change someone. So I just wanted to touch base on just talk about how I navigated through that situation and the realizations I had, and post-healing journey, and like, what, you know, how I got from point A to point B, where I was at, you know, lowest point in my life, to where I am now, which I would consider I'm definitely at a high in my life, and I'm super grateful. So
I think even just like since I've met you to like now, you've evolved even more than when I first met you. Like, and I think I think that's one of the reasons why I've always remained so like close to you, is because like I love it's like inspiring almost how you really are so receptive to like constructive criticism, or just like in general, like you have this like self-awareness and maturity that like if somebody tells you something, you're like super receptive, and then you're like, oh my God, that's something I will definitely work on. And like that's just something I admire so much about you. And
thanks, babe. It's all about mindset. It really is. So
truthfully,
that's like the pinnacle of my transformation, is I shifted my mindset. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about how I did that. But like I said, you know, dealing with addiction, if anyone ever has, it's difficult because you're not in control. And so for the longest time, I didn't accept that I was not in control. So I was trying to change him for the better. My intentions were pure, but I was trying to, you know, fix somebody, change someone. And ultimately, you know, I realized you can't, they're not going to change unless they want to. And so
I've definitely been through that, where like, and that's a hard lesson I've had to learn too in my last relationship, that like people only can change if they want to change. Like right. You can, so it's a hard one, because especially it's somebody you care about and you want the best for them. Like it's hard to watch them kind of just self-destruct basically.
Yeah, exactly. And so ultimately what I was doing is I was giving my energy away to that person. And so once I brought awareness to it, that I was giving my energy away to an external person, and it was disrupting my peace, and I was allowing it to. So, you know, I was up like countless nights with anxiety, wondering where he was he going to come home? Is he safe? Is everything okay? and it was eating me alive. I mean, I essentially was trying to control something that I couldn't. And so I think the breaking point was when I hit my rock bottom and realized I don't recognize myself anymore. I don't know, there's nowhere to go besides up from here. So I just turned to self-help books and podcasts and just started diving deep into my spirituality and philosophy. And I think that's where the transformation started.
And how did you start? Like, how would you kind of give advice to somebody that might be dealing with like a partner who has some sort of addiction, or they're like in an abusive relationship? Like, I guess talk a little bit more in depth of like when that moment happened where it kind of just hit you. And I think all of us, like girls especially, I feel like there comes a moment where like you've had enough and something just clicks, and it may be something so minor, but something just clicks in your head where you're just, I've had enough, or like I can't do this anymore.
Exactly.
And like when that moment hit you, what did you start doing on a day-to-day basis to kind of start like applying yourself to transform and also like build up the courage to leave? And then after you answer that, I would love if you shared like how you dealt with like your post-divorce, like how that healing journey was.
Right. So I felt powerless. So when I got to that lowest point, I felt there was nothing I could do. Like my emotions were so consumed in that one person. I just felt like I was out of control. Right. And so you hit the nail on the head. You said that you just get to a point where you're like, enough is enough. And that's what happened. I got to that point, and I was like, you know what? If not now, when? I'm literally doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result, and nothing is changing. I can't change him, so why don't I draw a circle around myself and focus on what I can change? So it was that simple mindset shift and realization of, okay, Kylie, can't change him, but you can change you and how you respond. So let's start there.
And I always like to tell my friends, and I'll say this to like my audience, God or the universe will always continue to give you the same lesson disguised differently until you learn. And
repeat, yes.
Like seriously, and it may be in a different person, disguised in a different environment, but like until you learn that lesson. And I think that's why it's so important for people to build that sort of self-awareness, because if you don't have that self-awareness to be like, okay, wait, this situation, this person, this environment is kind of like, why does it feel so familiar? And I think that's why it's so important to really take the time to like reflect.
Right. So at that point in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I'm trying to create an exit plan. I knew that this environment, I didn't have peace. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. So I knew I needed to change or do something to create an exit plan. But I still had so many fears. Like I had fears of how am I going to make it financially? How will it affect my children if we get divorced? My religious beliefs at the time kept me longer in the marriage. Simple things like fear of being alone. Am I going to meet somebody else?
And I also know that some people make their kids like an excuse as to why they don't leave,
to stay longer. Yeah.
But like I admire you so much for finding the strength to like, even though I think you did the best even for your kids, honestly, in that situation too.
I tried, but yeah, I mean, just all these fears, just so many fears flooding through my mind at the time. Fear of failure, like I failed as a wife, or as a whole as a marriage. Married for 5 years and that's it. So, and I definitely didn't just throw in the towel. I mean, I tried. We did therapy. We did all the things, but all the while, nothing is changing. It's only getting worse. And so, I'm just trying to navigate through this, and even fear of judgment of others, thinking like, just like I said, feeling like a failure. And so, anyhow, I think that all those fears being stated, I was like, okay, let me look within. I think the power is within. And I actually stumbled upon Dr. Joe Dispenza. Have you heard of his work?
Yeah, I've heard of him. I actually have a friend. Her name is Adriana. Like, I promise you she'll listen to this podcast. But I know her. Hi, Adriana. But she listens to him like religiously. Like she posts his podcast like all the time. I've heard he's great. I've only listened to like one episode, but I've heard he's great.
So he's actually a chiropractor, but he started studying neuroscience. And so it really just spoke to me at the time. And I started diving deep into the power of your mind, law of attraction, manifestation. And that is where it all began. And so during my marriage, I just was listening to podcasts on repeat, one after the other, audiobooks, all of the things, practicing meditation. And slowly but surely, I started to realized my value and just started this self-love journey. I think that being in that marriage and accepting the verbal abuse for so long, I started adopting those negative names that, I would hear from him, and I would believe them of myself. So I had all these limiting beliefs, and they kept me just stagnant, and I wasn't growing. And so I was basically undoing all those lies that I've been told for years about myself, all these negative labels that I was given by him, and I was undoing them one by one and just rerouting them.
I think people really don't understand the impact that words have. I know a lot of times, people always say actions speak louder than words. Yes, although that is true, I also think that words carry a lot of weight, especially on your mental health. And I think when you have a partner who's just not kind or verbally kind, I think in general, it slowly picks away at you mentally to the point where you do start questioning your self-worth. You do start questioning your own self-beliefs. And that is such a hard thing to deal with, because eventually as much as it weighs on you mentally, it also weighs on you emotionally.
Exactly. And so Joe Dispenza, he teaches that you're the creator of your life. So you can literally create your heaven or your hell right here on earth. And so your thoughts are so powerful. And once I realized that, I started being more intentional about what was going on in my head. And I had so many negative thinking patterns just on repeat that I was telling myself daily. And so once I brought awareness to them, I just uprooted them just like a filter. Reminds me of when you go stand in line at a club and there's a bouncer and okay, you can come in, you can't come in. There's the bouncer in my mind. It's literally, it's
That's a funny way to put it, but I like that.
It's no, anything negative, any negative self-talk.
Decline.
Decline. Sorry. You're not.
You're not it.
You can't sit with us. So
you can't sit with us.
And the more I did that, I just found it became easier and easier. And over time, with repetition, my mind was literally being rewired, and new neural pathways were being created in my head. And so that's the neuroscience behind it. So, Dr. Joe Dispenza, that's one example. But I read a book called Becoming Supernatural that he wrote, and it was just super impactful.
And it's so good that you started doing those things, because I'm sure that was started to be a really good catalyst for you to kind of navigate what you were going through. I think oftentimes from what I've heard a lot of people that they kind of struggle to start that journey. And I think a lot of times, it's scary to confront your own demons and your own issues, right? But I also think it's so important that if you're unhappy with the way your life is then do something about it. And I think that in itself should be a motivation for you wanting to change. And as you said earlier, if you keep doing kind of the same thing, you can't expect different results. And so
right.
And I told somebody really special to me the other day, I was nothing changes if nothing changes. And if you really think about that on a deeper level, it's true.
It's so simple, but so profound.
Yeah, really. And he was like, wow, that's so deep. And I was no, but it's true though. And I think a lot of times I reposted this post the other day, and it basically was that change is scary, but so is staying the same. And I really resonated with that. And I think a lot of people stay just stuck out of fear.
Yeah, it's choose your heart. They're both hard, but choose your heart.
Yeah.
No, you're so right. And we get stuck in this victim mentality. And so it's just choosing to no longer be the victim and realize there's no savior coming to save you. It's either you help
really
yourself
up to you
or not. And so, I just decided enough is enough, and if not now, when? So I decided now, and the reading, continued, and I finally just had the courage to leave, and I just felt empowered enough to take the jump, and just despite all my list of fears I had, and I did it, and I left, and I had no job at the time. I was, had zero income. It was actually during pandemic.
Let me tell you all, she is such a boss. B. Let's just put it that. Beep. But she really is I don't know. She is honestly, out of all my friends, she really hustles. I really madly respect her for how hard she works. And I'm so serious. I admire her for so many reasons, but she really works hard. And I think that it's really inspiring the way you've taken your life from that point to where you are now. I'm just in awe of you.
Thank you, babe. It's been a journey, but I'm losing my train of thought. You're making me emotional. Just
Oh, I love you.
so sweet. But yeah, so I finally had the courage to leave. And like I said, 2020 pandemic, just had a newborn and a 5-year-old, and I had all the reason to stay, right? But I want to give people, just hope and encourage that even in the darkest of times where you're at your lowest low, there's the only way is up, just forward movement. And so
I think a lot of times people, when they're in that situation where they feel like there's no way out, right? Mm-hmm. Like, use your resources, talk to people like your family or your friends, or like even like government resources, what have you. I just feel like there's always, when there's a will, there's a way. My dad has always told me that. And I just always like to reiterate that to people. Like, if things feel overwhelming like that, break it down to a point and a step by step. Like, okay, like right now, I'm sure, at some point you're like, okay, like my finances are a concern. Like, I need to get a job. And like, you used your resources to kind of figure out step by step. Like, you don't have to like figure everything out in a day. And I feel like a lot of times that's why people just kind of like stay stuck, because they're like, they're overwhelmed. Like the thought of that just sounds so overwhelming. But just break it down step by step. Figure one thing 1 week at a time if that's what it takes you. But like, break it down to a point where it feels manageable for you, to the point where like at some point you get yourself out of that situation, right?
Exactly.
And I always like to, one thing I really feel like I cannot get over and also emphasize enough to people, a lot of times, and at some point I'll do an episode kind of sharing like a really big in depth of my life story, but there's been so much I've been through, and I just really can't get with the program when people tell me, they're like, well, like, my goldfish died 10 years ago and that's why I don't do it. I'm just giving like a lame
prolonging though.
Yes. But they like stay in this mentality of being a victim. And I'm like, you have no idea. Like, so many people, I think so many people go that are like mentally strong. You have to figure out a will and a way to get yourself out of it. And I feel like a lot of times it's not an excuse. And I'm pretty black and white when it comes to that. Like, you really have to be like mentally strong and get that kind of discipline to really get yourself out of those situations. Because I just don't believe in excuses, truthfully. I think that in order to be where you want to be in life, like, it's ultimately up to you. Yeah.
Period. So, I mean, you said it. You have to learn how to shorten your emotional refractory period. I learned that. I forget what author, but as I was healing and reading, I learned this tool, and it's so useful. I use it still to this day, but it's reminded me when you talked about the goldfish story, that people, that's how you enter into states of anxiety or depression, is because something that happened years ago, you're reliving it daily. Like, your body literally doesn't know the difference. It's experiencing it over and over again as if it happened again and again. And so that's where the neuroscience comes in. You have to rewire your mind and you have to interrupt that pattern. You have to do something different. And then the repetition is what creates the new neural pathways. And then suddenly it's a new habit formed. And one day you just wake up and you're transformed. Like, you're no longer, shackled by that anxiety or the fear or the negative thoughts. And so that's exactly what I did. And, created that exit plan, job lined up, all the things. And a lot of it just fell into place. It really did. When you have that positive mindset, like you said, if there's a will, there's a way.
To attract to you.
Law of attraction. Like, that's what was happening. It reminds me of, like, if you've ever, rode a bike, where do you look when you're riding a bike? You look where you want to go, straight ahead. You don't look at the tree to the left or the rock to the right that you don't want to hit. If you do, you're going to veer off and hit it. So you want to focus on what you want and not what you don't. And it sounds so simple, but it's truly like, that is the law of attraction. And like The Secret, that was my first
oh my gosh, my dad literally introduced me that. He was like, I have a movie, we have to watch it. And I'm over here thinking it's like a fun like comedy. No, it was like The Secret of Life.
And you don't make my kids watch that.
No, it's a good, and he was like, Natalie, like, if you ever want to get everything you want in life, like, you need to like really watch this movie with you. And I watched it, and honestly, I will never forget it. Like, that honestly, I watched it so young.
For you,
my dad, and I will give him a shout out to my parents. They really did the best job in terms of really trying to implement a lot of positive, good foundational seeds in my head, and it honestly has paid off now as an adult. Like the amount of compliments people give me, like, you were raised so well, and like you can tell your dad took his time with you, whatever. And I always think about how impactful my dad was with me. But I remember, like, in the Secret of Life movie, there was, I don't know if you remember this, but it was like a guy like driving, pretending to drive a Ferrari, and he was like envisioning it, feeling it, like, and I've always taken that with me, and that's why I'm so. Some people honestly think I'm like sunshine and rainbows, but honestly, I'm just like Delulu as hell.
Sometimes Delulu.
But it works though.
You have to live that and act as if you already have it. That's where the magic happens. You can't just think it, will it to happen. It's paired with the emotion. So when you're meditating, when you're visualizing the life that you want and the person you want to be, you're also embodying the emotion as if you already have achieved it.
Already have it, yeah.
And if you want to, I mean, this is my nerdy side, but look
up love that side.
Look up quantum physics, and I got into quantum physics and like quantum jumping, and so that's where you can literally tune into a different reality, like a different frequency, and you're the creator of your life. So if you just tune into that, and you're achieving it so much quicker, like you're accelerating, the path to your goals. So. I mean, like I said, so left the marriage, and now I'm on my way to a road of, healing and just continued growth, and start a new job. And from there, I think that what was important for me in that season was just really paying attention to who I'm spending my time around. And I did a lot of purging of friends, and so. You talked a little bit about that too, but quality over quantity. I mean, I'm a small circle kind of girl. I think
Same.
You are too.
Yeah.
So we're in that circle together.
Yeah.
But,
small, but
right. Again, now real life bouncers. We're like, sorry, you can't split this. But it's not in a rude
not in
way.
a mean way. No, it's
way.
just that I think you and I always say this to people that are really close to me. And honestly, like when I kind of start feeling like a person is just not meant for me, I'm like, I have not worked this hard to get to the point where I'm at emotionally and mentally for you to come and try to disturb that kind of work.
It's just boundaries. What do they say? Keeping the pigs out and the pearls in. We're just protecting
I've never heard that
energy.
saying. I don't know where Kylie gets these like sayings. She's like, the chickens are clucking, and I'm like, what?
They're
does
all
that mean?
farmhouse style.
Are you reading a lot of animal books to your children?
I'm a country girl at heart, not really.
Girl, you in the country? I could not see it.
Oh my gosh. But yes, just protecting your energy and your peace with boundaries. And, it's not in a mean way. It's just like,
we're just protective.
Yeah. When you love yourself, because I didn't before. I did not. And so I was accepting of that behavior and mistreatment and abuse. But when you love yourself and you honor yourself, you have such high standards, and you're like, if you're not going to respect my boundaries, get out of my life, basically.
Yeah, no, respectfully. No,
yeah.
And I think I speak for a lot of girls that like have been in like a crappy abusive relationship, and I myself have been there as well. It is a tough place to be, but ultimately, like, let go or get dragged. I've heard that saying so many times all over social media, but I so agree with it, because sooner or later, like, if you don't muster up the courage to leave, like, that person will figure out, it will always find its way to just kind of end, and you have no other place but to go but up at that point. And I feel like I honestly remember, like, when I went through the same situation of like a really bad relationship, like, I didn't eat for like a week. I literally lost 10 pounds. It was like terrible. A lot of like my close friends came to like visit me, like would bring me food. It was tough, honestly. Like, I literally had to go to like a narcissistic abuse recovery program, because it like did such a bad impact on like my mental health. I literally had to go like to rewire my brain, because I literally just thought that I wasn't like deserving of love, and like all these like negative like self-beliefs, like you said earlier.
It's like we're brainwashed, and we're having to undo
basically,
the brainwashing.
yeah. And so I really took the time to like pray a lot, and like my sister literally called me at the end of like the first week, and she would check in on me daily, but at some point she was like, okay, like, you need to get up and go run a mile. Like, it's not even an option now. And like, I'm a runner at heart, so she knew that I would have enjoyed that, and I did. And honestly, it kind of just started with that, like, just doing things for your own well-being. And I think that's something I really wanted to like relay to my audience, is that like on a day-to-day basis, build that discipline within yourself to commit to one thing, just one thing on your day-to-day basis that like is for you. I think a lot of times, especially women, I hate this excuse that like I have kids, I have work, I have like I'm married, or like I have all these errands. I don't care.
Make time. You can
Make time. Like you make time for the things that matter. And if you
Prioritize.
aren't like a priority in your day, then that should tell you already like, okay, that's something I need to work on my self-love. And I kid you not, committing to one thing a day for yourself literally builds confidence without even realizing. Like on a very subconscious level, I personally started to commit to like working out or like reading 10 pages on my phone, like a lot of times. And I'll tell you guys right now, there's like free books online. Like if there's a book, The Mountain Is You by Brianna West.
Favorite.
Y'all need to read that. Best book ever.
Changed my life.
No, it's literally my number one, and I always recommend it to everyone. It was free.
A Mountain Is You guide to self-sabotage, turning self-sabotage into self-mastery.
Yes.
Yeah, so
look
good.
at you memorizing it. Yeah, no, but I literally found the PDF file online for free. And like, I just, again, if there's a will, there's a way. And I feel like I started to commit to reading 10 pages of that every day. And like, you guys don't realize the impact on what that does to you. So if you're looking to really like rebuild your confidence, or like really trying to shift that mindset from viewing things in such a negative way, or you're somebody who's prone to like self-sabotage or like self-destructing, like commit to doing one thing a day for yourself that is positive and brings you sort of like comfort. Do it every day.
No excuses.
No excuses. Really. Like, even if you're tired, busy, I don't care. Like the other day I worked 19 hours. I literally only slept 3 hours. I was so crazy. I was doing overtime. I'm so crazy.
Hey, we can sleep when we're dead.
No, literally.
Well, and you mentioned earlier, like even kids,
I went running.
On that. Oh, you went running?
I ran through like 8 miles.
I hate running. So I was going to say, speaking on behalf of like people with children that use that as an excuse. So I always think of this example when you're on a flight and the cute little flight attendants are doing their little demo, the safety demo.
Yeah.
They always say we lose oxygen, in the aircraft. The parent, you
adult, do it on yourself first.
Take care of yourself first, and then your child, and that's the perfect, example of you have to take care of yourself. How can you pour into others or your children if your cup is empty? And so,
yes.
So
I tell that to people all the time, and I'm like, you're at negative.
Right.
So I think it's super important to do that.
No mom shaming. I mean, I was just in Tulum, like refilling my cup. So some people may mom shame, but it's all about balance. You have to do what makes you happy. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
Are we running out of time?
We're running out of time, but I really appreciate all of you listening in and really taking the time to join me on this journey. I feel like this was a very productive conversation. So hopefully you guys are able to grasp something out of this. I really hope that you guys find a way to shift your mindset into viewing negative things. And I kind of talked to Kylie about this a little bit yesterday, but it's called the trampoline effect. And I feel like every new level has its demons, its issues, but what you do, like you're at level 1 and you drop down and you have a low point in your life, what you do in that low point determines how high you can go at the next level. And on that next level, you're going to go back down and you're going to do, have a low point. And again, what you do with those low points are so crucial because it determines how the next time, your next high, if you would, or your next level. So I really encourage you guys to really start finding the good and the bad. And I know it sounds like super cliche, but truthfully, I think I think when you find the lesson in negative experiences, like you really are able to manage life so much better. And I think life doesn't get easier. It's all about like, if you learn to manage how to respond and manage life's obstacles, life just gets easier.
Right. Finding joy even in the seasons of suffering, because there's always joy to be found. I mean, you find what you seek. So it's all about the mindset. That's beautiful. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Well, until next time.
I know. Until next time, everyone. And I hope thank you so much, Kylie, for taking the time for joining me and being a part of this. I love you so much.
I love you.
I really always tell people, I'm like, I speak so highly of Kylie, and I'm like, I just hope everyone has a Kylie. Like, I'm so serious.
You sound like Dr. Seuss. Highly of Kylie.
Rhyming over here. But I love you. And I honestly, anybody who's listening to this podcast, I genuinely want the best for people. And that's the whole reason why I'm doing this. I really have so much love in my heart because I've gone through so much. And I never want people to feel like what I felt, which is basically like where you feel really like alone or misunderstood. And like, I really hope that as like you guys continue to listen to this podcast, that you guys can really gain something out of this and learn that like when you're at that low point, like I promise, like it's not the end. Like it's not end all be all.
No.
So there are ways to get out of it, and there are ways to navigate life, and it does get easier, guys. You just have to really push yourself. Push your boundaries and get out of your comfort zone, as I'm doing with this podcast.
I'm so proud of you. Embrace the comfort. That's the only way to grow.
Yeah, truthfully, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So
You're a gem. Love you.
I love you.
Bye.
I love everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.